What is up, NFL fans? Welcome back to another NFL Whip Around. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Coach Kevin Smith. We're a day late, but don't worry. We're going to be bringing you the full NFL Whip Around. What's up, Coach? How are you?
What's up, Jeff? Super Bowl week. Exciting week.
It is, but I got to be honest. Like, as just an NFL fan, what are your thoughts on this game? Just in terms of, I don't know. Everyone gets excited for the Super Bowl because maybe it's the commercials or the halftime show or anything like that. I don't know. There's something about this game that just doesn't. It lacks juice. It's a term I use often on my Let's Ride podcast. I don't know. Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I would say of recent Super Bowls, this one feels like it has the least amount of buzz. I
Yeah.
don't think anyone outside of the New England area is excited to see the Patriots back in the Super Bowl. You figured, they had the dynasty that lasted almost 2 decades with Belichick and Brady. And when that dissipated, it felt like it was only fair that they would have to wait a little bit longer to get back. But here they are, right? With a completely different incarnation of the Patriots, new coaches, quarterbacks, players, etc. On one hand, it's like, hey man, good for them to get there so quickly. That's impressive. And on the other hand, you're right. It's like Patriots again.
Well, it's not just the team. Like there's no real attraction to this game. I mean, who are the big name players playing in this game? Sam Darnold, Drake May. I mean, what Jackson Smith Najigba is great, but he's not a name. There's no real names. I'm not forgetting someone, but I cannot for the life of me think about a name that someone would say, put that guy on the poster because he's a recognizable name and face. Can you think of someone?
Not really. I mean, if you're a football purist, just the watching Jackson Smith and Jigba run routes is a beautiful thing. These are two great defenses. These are games where, like, if you want to really dig into the X's and the O's, it'll be fascinating. But if you're a casual fan, it doesn't have the appeal that some recent ones have had.
Yeah, and I think the NFL, that they always have to appeal to the casual fan for the Super Bowl, and that's when there's such a big deal made of the halftime artist. In this case, Bad Bunny. I don't know what the heck he does. I know him more as Happy Gilmore's caddy from Happy Gilmore too, but still, it's a situation where let's talk about the actual game itself and not just for the casual fan. You said this is a game of two defenses. I agree wholeheartedly. I think this is going to be a game which early on, I think most Super Bowls, I'd have to go back and look. I feel like most Super Bowls, it's kind of like, okay, we're just going to kind of wait each other out. We're going to kind of feel the feeling out process. Seattle has the edge in almost every category, though, don't they?
They do. They're the better football team in terms of when you take the completeness of each roster, both sides of the ball. Mike McDonald's defense has been phenomenal, but they've got holes just like everybody else does. I mean, if you're the Patriots, I would imagine you're going to spend a lot of time looking at the last two games between Seattle and the Rams when the Rams put up, I think it was 31 and 37 points respectively, or 27 and 37 respectively. The Rams did that by using a lot of big personnel. They went heavy. They ran a lot of 12 and 13. And Mike Vrabel, I mean, that's his sweet spot. He loves to load the big guys up. He uses more fullbacks than he does multiple tight ends. But either way, they're going to probably put big bodies on the field and try to grind some clock and then, hopefully induce Seattle into trying to come down with their safeties and then hit big shots over the top. It's going to be that kind of a game. Again, it's not going to be the kind of game where what have we gotten used to? Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, the big superstar quarterback out there, making superstar quarterback plays in big moments. Maybe that'll happen, but I think the core of this game is going to be in the X's and O's and in the trenches, and that probably takes a little of the appeal away.
What's your take on Drake May? I know he's been on the injury report. I don't think that's going to be an issue when it comes to game time, but I think back to let's go back to 2005, Ben Roethlisberger's second year in the league. They kind of rode Ben Roethlisberger throwing the football into the Super Bowl. When the Super Bowl came, he played like garbage. They still win the game against Seattle, ironically. But nonetheless, Drake May, the Seahawks are going to say in Mike McDonald's defense, you're not going to run it on us. You're going to have to throw. Do you trust Drake May to be able to do that with his cast of characters around him as receiving weapons?
Do I trust it? I mean, I'll say it like this. If he plays well, I won't be shocked. But if I'm Seattle, I am 100% making him beat me. I mean,
Right.
I'm going into that game saying if we're going to get beat, it's going to be because the second year quarterback who's been dinged up and who hasn't exactly lit it up this postseason played the game of his life.
Yeah. Drake May's athleticism is the one X factor. If someone said, Jeff, what's the X factor in the Super Bowl? I would say it's Drake May's ability to extend and to run the football. And in the playoffs, even against Denver, he had over 60 yards rushing. The play that sealed the victory in Denver in the snow globe was a Drake May keeps it on the edge and beats the edge defender and gets the first down, and that seals the victory. What else would be an X factor for you on either side of the football for either team, coach?
Well, I'll just pick up on that point real quick. You look at New England's run game. Ramondre Stevenson is a between the tackles, kind of battering ram. You're not going to get. I don't think he'll be extremely productive against this Seattle defense. Travion Henderson's a home run hitter, but his workload's been reduced in recent weeks. I don't know if it's the rookie wall thing or whatever it is, but he hasn't been as effective. So you're right. If you're New England and you're looking for ways to shake loose some yards in the run game, I wouldn't be surprised to see some design runs, not just scrambles, but design runs for May. When I look at X factors, obviously JSN, I mean, he is so good. His NFC championship game was unbelievable. I mean, he made not just the one-handed catches and this highlight plays, but his route running was ridiculous. He's a guy that you have to commit two guys to. You can't cover him man-to-man. So New England's going to have a plan for how they want to handle him. And then Seattle's sneaky good at tight end. They do a nice job getting their tight ends involved, particularly in the red zone. A lot of pocket movement. They'll boot and get Darnold outside. And so that'll be interesting to see. If you've got safety help shaded to JSN, then that probably means you're going to have to cover the tight ends with linebackers. So that could be an interesting matchup to watch.
All right, so here we go. We have the Super Bowl. The line is the Seattle Seahawks are getting 4.5. Shockingly enough, that line has stayed pretty steady since it opened up. Let me just quickly, it opened as a 3.5, went to 4.5. So more money is going in the Seattle favor. They're trying to get money on the Patriots with a total of 45.5. What's your prediction for the game, coach? I'm curious what you think.
Yeah. It feels like 45. Vegas is so good.
Yes.
That's the perfect number because it's such a, you think to yourself, what's 45.5 points? Oh, well, it's like a 26-20 game or a 25, we don't get 25 points, but 27, not 20, well, something like that. And you feel like you're going to be in that range somewhere. I would be hesitant to bet the over or the under. I mean, if I were thinking about betting money, I would look at Drake May's over under because I think that he's going to run for some decent yards in this one. But I feel as though if you forced me to make a bet on this game, I would put money on Seattle on the over, on to cover. But I think it's going to be a competitive game. I think New England's really good. I just don't know if they're ready to win a Super Bowl yet.
I agree. Seattle giving the 4.5. I'll take them. I'm going to go with the under, though. I don't think New England scores a lot of points. And so if you think about it, if they score 10, are you trusting the Seahawks to put up that many points to get over 45.5? I'm not. So I would say take the under. I still think that early on in Super Bowls, it's just real low scoring as they kind of figure things out. I'll take the under, though. Seattle giving the 4.5. That's a lot of points. That's still, I think they cover. Any final thoughts on the Super Bowl, coach?
It'll be interesting to see how the Seahawks offense operates, given the fact that Clint Kubiak has now taken the Raiders job. I just feel like the NFL is so competitive and so singular in terms of people's focus that when you divide your focus, even though he's going to say all the right things, I'm 100% locked in. He already said some of those things in Monday's introductory press conference. I just can't help but think, what mental space does that take up for you? You've got the gig of a lifetime. I'm going to be a first-time head coach in the NFL. That's waiting for me. You want to get to work right away. A couple of years ago, Jonathan Gannon, who was then the Eagles defensive coordinator, was kind of secretly being recruited by the Cardinals. The Cardinals got hit with some tampering charges for this. And Gannon was kind of negotiating with them during Super Bowl preparation to become their next head coach. And then he went out, and the Eagles defense gave up 38 points to the Chiefs. And Philly fans will never forgive Jonathan Gannon because they're convinced that his attention was divided in that Super Bowl week. And so it'd be really interesting to see, how does Seattle's offense perform? Does it feed into the narrative that these coaching interviews for potential head coaches are a distraction?
Well, last year, Kellen Moore, when he was with Philadelphia, they win the Super Bowl, and he still was. Everyone knew he was going to New Orleans, so he was able to kind of buck that trend. But I agree, it's going to be very interesting to see how that works out for Kubiak. And speaking of which, let's talk about the head coaching cycle. It is done, at least unless there's some stunning dismissal at some point. With the Raiders, obviously, you mentioned Kubiak, the Cardinals with LaFleur coming from LA. I don't know if we talked about Joe Brady in Buffalo. They're all set, though. Coach, out of all the head coaches that are now new in some way, shape, or form in some locale, what was your favorite hire?
I really do like the Kubiak hire for the Raiders, because you look at like what he's going to inherit. Vegas has a decent defense. That defense is not terrible. They've got some big names. They've got that defense can allow you to hang in games. But the Raiders averaged 14 points per game last year, worst in the NFL. So you obviously have to do a lot better. You bring in Kubiak, who is from a famous coaching tree, has got tons of experience, has never been a head coach before, but obviously with what he's done with that Seattle offense, that's a great recipe for a team like the Raiders, where they can be a ball control offense, but they can also be explosive when they need to. He's got some weapons there in Genti and Bowers. He's going to get Fernando Mendoza with the #1 pick. They got $90 million in cap space, and you got Tom Brady to lean on. I think that's a great foundation for a first-year head coach. Now, again, it's the Raiders, so you have to overcome history there. I mean, they have found ways to derail promising situations, but that's one that I think in the big picture will probably work out well.
When you think about the head coaching hire, are you thinking singularly of just the coach that was tabbed to be the head coach, or are you also lumping in the staff that they're building?
Yeah, I think you have to consider the staff, because, I mean, in this instance, I don't know what Kubiak's staff is going
Right.
to look like, but we've seen a lot of these coaches begin to put their staffs together. Some of the coaches are really being lauded for being able to build a deep and diverse staff. I mean, Jesse Minter
Yeah.
hiring, Anthony Weaver was a big deal down in Baltimore. I think Mike McCarthy has quietly put together a really deep staff in Pittsburgh. The Steelers are creating coaching positions. I mean, they've got like senior assistant positions that never existed before, and assistant position coaches that never existed before. So it looks like Pittsburgh has decided that they're going to grow their staff. So yeah, this is all part of the process.
All right, so you know these coaches way more than I do. So my opinion, who gives a crap? But let's go to, what was your least favorite hire of the cycle? So you said the favorite was obviously Kubiak in Vegas, and there's a lot of reasons why. Out of all the ones, what was the most head scratching that maybe didn't make sense to you?
Well, I I look at Miami's situation. They went with Jeff Hafley, the defensive coordinator out of Green Bay. They had Anthony Weaver as their own DC. I mean, he got multiple interviews in the cycle. He was rumored to be a top candidate of several teams. Why not elevate Weaver? Why bring in another defensive guy when your real struggles were on the offensive side of the ball? Now, I know with Mike McDaniel leaving, the whole notion was like, hey, McDaniel's an offensive guy, and maybe we're not tough enough, and we need to get tougher, etc. But where do you go now offensively in Miami? Who's your quarterback? Are you sticking with Tua? Are you moving on to someone else? You got to solve that problem. The Dolphins, for having Mike McDaniel as their head coach, they just weren't really good enough offensively. So I don't understand why they didn't elevate Weaver if he was such a promising coaching prospect.
What were your thoughts on Brady in Buffalo? That didn't make much sense either. You get rid of McDermott and then you just internally promote someone. I've thought that process from the moment they said we're firing Sean McDermott, it just didn't make sense to me. What about you?
I agree. They elevated. They cited the reason for firing Sean McDermott as their lack of postseason success, but then they elevated the guy who's been there for the last 4 years, who has been at the center, at least offensively, of a lot of those postseason disappointments. And he's a goofy guy, Joe Brady. I don't know if you saw any of his comments, but he's like he reminds me of a player. He's like a dude. And I don't know. He didn't impress me with his presence. And I think to myself, like, you need a serious guy who's going to command the room. And I'm not saying he can't do that. And he's been lauded for his X and O's for a long time. But I thought his introductory press conference was kind of clownish, and it didn't impress me. So when you combine it with the process, it'll be interesting to watch that one.
All right. I want to get your take on something as we go to our next topic. I don't know, Coach. I don't think you're a hockey fan at all, but hockey has been known to say, like, it is a what have you done for me lately league. And if you even start the year off slow as a coach, you're done. So all the work that you do in the offseason, in the preseason, training, all that stuff, if coaches have a bad first 2-3 weeks, they get fired in the NHL. Like, they don't even think twice. You could have won the Stanley Cup 2 years ago. It doesn't matter. You're done. Is the NFL not to that extent, but are they slowly moving in that direction? Here's a statistic that 21 of 32 NFL teams are expected to have a new offensive coordinator next year. That is incredible. Now, I understand we had, 10 total vacancies at head coach. So obviously you're going to have some changeover there with the new regime coming in. They're going to have new coordinators, but that's crazy. And then you even sent me a graphic about the current head coaches and DCs and OCs and GMs, and the turnover rate is just incredible. What's your take on this? And then we can even tie it in with the Rooney Rule and the lack of minority promotions and hirings as well. What's your take on all that?
Yeah, I mean, if you expand that, there are 62 offensive and defensive coordinators who call plays in the league. There's only a couple, who don't. Of those 62, 53 of them have been hired in the last 3 years. That's remarkable, right? I mean, Steve Spagnuolo is the veteran, and he goes back to 2017 in Kansas City. He's the longest tenured coordinator in the league. I just feel as though it demonstrates a remarkable lack of restraint on the part of ownership, who are so eager to win now, but also so impulsive that they don't let any roots grow. How do you improve if there's constant turnover? That's hard. I mean, the Steelers are heading for their 5th offensive coordinator in the last 5 years or so. Jalen Hurts has had 5 different OCs in his 5 years as the starting quarterback in Philly. I mean, I think it's pretty hard to be consistent when you're constantly dealing with that turnover, but the turnover is a product of ownership groups and front offices feeling as though they have to win now and not having the patience to let things develop.
Well, it's a fine line between going out there and saying, we're going to trust the process, we're going to keep it going, and the definition of insanity, which is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So as a coach, or if you were a GM/owner, where would that line be? So you want to give your coaches an opportunity to prove themselves. You want to give them an opportunity to showcase that they're able to change and progress in the right way. And then there's oh my gosh, we've been watching this for how many years? It's time for a change. What do you think is that line in the sand, so to speak?
Yeah. It's funny. When I interviewed to be the head coach at our high school here, we were coming off of back-to-back 2-win seasons, and the numbers were bad. The talent was bad. Everybody knew, like, we weren't going to win right out of the gate. And I brought that up at the interview. I was like, look, we might only win 2 games again this year. What is your expectation? And the athletic director said, our expectation is for you to show progress each year. That we have to be moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
And I think that is really where you need to be able to assess your coaching staff. Like, are we moving in the right direction? Are we showing progress? And at what point does the product, do you kind of get stuck? Like that's kind of what happened with Mike Tomlin and Sean McDermott. That those organizations made decisions. We're stuck right now. Like we're good, but we're not getting better. And we don't know if these guys can fix it. And so they moved on. I think that's, I think there's a lot of coaches where you have one backslide, 1 year of regression, and boom, they're gone. And you understand it. I mean, obviously you do, because you have to respond to media narratives and fan narratives, etc. But it feels like a little more patience would benefit some of these franchises.
I think it's not just patience, it's also making the right hire. It's so many times. Let's look at Pittsburgh as an example. So when Todd Haley leaves, what do the Steelers do? Well, they promote Ben Roethlisberger's buddy, Randy Fichtner. And he's not suited to be an NFL play caller. But because Ben Roethlisberger is essentially running things himself, you just let it go. And then you bring in Matt Canada, who, again, internal hire, doesn't have the credentials to be an NFL OC. You end up having to fire him midseason. You have two people, Mike Sullivan and Eddie Faulkner, doing co-coordinator for the rest of that year. And then you finally bring in Arthur Smith, who semi brings in a modern NFL offense, if you want to call it that. You just got to make the right hire. Like, to change is okay, but to make the wrong change just sets you back even further. And so,
and sometimes, to pick up on that real quick, sometimes your hire's too good. Like, you look at Philly's situation. They've had, again, they're now going to be on their 5th offense coordinator in 5 years. Well, they made 2 great hires. They hired Shane Steichen and they hired Kellen Moore. And those guys were so good, they went on and they got head coaching jobs. Yeah. And then they made 2 awful hires, Brian Johnson and Kevin Patullo, neither of whom had ever called plays before. And each of those, and they both lasted 1 year and were fired. So it's kind of like they can't find the sweet spot. They're missing on one end and they're too good on the other end, and they're losing guys as a result.
Yeah, I mean, you could look at Detroit as well. You lose Ben Johnson to head coach of the Bears. You don't succeed in finding a successor. They're going to have to try again. And so they're just going to have to kind of rinse and repeat. But real quick, there's been a lot of people out there talking about the lack of minority hires as a part of the Rooney Rule. And for those that don't know, the Rooney Rule, which is obviously based around the late ambassador Dan Rooney and his thoughts on how to help minorities get more exposure. Each NFL team, I believe, is for coordinator positions. Maybe it's not coordinators. I know for head coach, you have to have so many interviews with minority candidates before you make your decision. And this cycle had, I believe, just one minority candidate that was hired. Coach, what's your take on the Rooney Rule? Is it outdated? Does it need updated? What do you think?
Yeah, I think the intention is there, and I think that it's a well-intended rule, because obviously for a long time in the league, there just weren't opportunities for African American coaches in particular. But now it's almost become, I don't want to say a joke, but you question sometimes, is this a legitimate interview, or is this a box being checked? A league that is about 70% African American in terms of the players, it's actually even a little bit higher than that, has 3 out of its 32 NFL coaches who are African American. So that's less than 10%. So if 70-some% of the players are African American, but less than 10% of the coaches are African American, it feels like there's a disconnect there. And again, the Rooney Rule is intended to try to repair that. But I don't see. Here's my issue. I don't know what you do. Like, you can't make teams hire certain individuals. So other than have a reevaluation of the process and say, is there a better way to go about this? I don't know how you right that imbalance.
Well, Darius Butler was the one that made the most noise on Twitter, but he didn't blame the owners, the general managers. He said there's a pipeline problem, meaning getting these coaches into the system, helping them to then elevate their status to probably as an assistant, to a position coach, to potentially coordinators. And maybe that's where the NFL has to go. They have the Rooney Rule in place for the big hires. We're talking coordinators and head coach. Do they have the systems in place to help those minority candidates, those players, the 70% that you mentioned, who do want to go into coaching, and then say, okay, well, here, enter this system? And I do actually think they have a pathway program of some sort, but maybe they need to tweak that as well. I don't know. Unfortunately, as you and I sit here as two white middle-aged men, it's difficult for us to really comment on what we think outside of just being from the outsider's perspective. I think that, like you said, the genesis of this is very, very great. It's it's definitely well intended, but I can understand why the optics are that it needs adjusted. I'm just not sure where to go from that. Coach, any final thoughts?
That's where I am. You'd have to put me in a room with some bigger thinkers than myself on this particular topic to be able to start kicking around solutions, because the creation of opportunity is all you can ask for.
Right.
Like there's the equality of opportunity and the equality of results, and nobody is guaranteeing or wants to be guaranteed the equality of results. Results are a matter of hard work and your good fortune and what you do with your opportunities, but the equality of opportunity needs to be real. And that's what they have to decide, if they feel like the Rooney Rule is creating the adequate amount of opportunity.
Well, and let's also not forget that the lawsuit between Brian Flores and the NFL, part of that lawsuit was the fact that when he was going on interviews, he was not treated in any way, shape, or form like an actual candidate. He was treated, like you said, checking a box. And that's not the intent of the rule. It's to give them a legitimate look. And so let's tie this in with another interesting coaching slash GM decision. And that was the Minnesota Vikings parting ways with their GM. It was weird enough, the timing of everything, but then now this news comes out of paternity leave. He took 2 weeks off, I'm guessing, and was working remotely. I don't know, Coach. What are your thoughts on this issue in Minnesota? We'll call it.
People are killing him for it, for
Yeah.
the paternity leave issue. Like, I can't believe a general manager took 2 weeks off, even though he was attending meetings virtually and things like that. It's a catch-22. You want to say, hey, we reserve the rights as human beings to have both a career and a family. Women went through this for a long time. If I have to choose between one or the other? I shouldn't. If I'm a married man and my wife has a baby, you're telling me I can't take a couple of days to be with my family, etc. On the other hand, yeah, that's exactly what we're telling you. If you want to be an NFL general manager or an NFL head coach, this is the deal. There are plenty of head coaches who have lost their marriages, lost their families because of their dedication to the job. And it is almost like a choice. It is unbelievably difficult on the family. I've talked to you about this before. I was very close with Bill Parcells' daughter. She lived in 10 different cities in 11 years growing up as her dad climbed the college ranks and then eventually into the NFL and just took every, job that he could to better his situation. You are, as a family, marrying into a situation that you have to be okay with. Like, you got to know this is the deal. And Joe Brady was talking about it at his introductory press conference about how his wife was having a baby and he wasn't even there. He was like on the phone with her because he was working and was just like, hey, good luck, babe. I mean, and people laughed at it, but it's like, it's kind of crazy when you think about it, but that's the reality.
See, the paternity leave is just, in my opinion, is just kind of like it was being thrown out there as almost like a distraction. The reason why, in my opinion, he was fired is because they've made some really bad decisions in regards to him being the GM calling the shots. They let Sam Darnold walk. They drafted JJ McCarthy when plenty of people had some question marks surrounding him. And ultimately, they put all their eggs into JJ McCarthy's basket when they had options. They could have tried to bring back Danny Dimes. They could have maybe potentially lured Aaron Rodgers to Minnesota. They didn't go take any of those routes. I think that had more to do with than the fact that he was taking some time with his family. You agree or disagree?
Yeah, I agree. Passed on Kyle Hamilton.
Yep.
He took Lewis, I can't remember how you pronounce his last name, Cine or Cine, who was in the league for a year and was gone. So yeah, there were definitely some bad decisions there made as a general manager. The thing that caught people's attention, though, was really, the paternity leave and just the question of, kind of like what we were talking about at the beginning of the show with Clint Kubiak, singular focus. If this is not your singular focus, you're falling behind because there are enough people willing to devote every waking hour of their life to it, that at least the perception is you're being outworked.
Yeah. And now Minnesota, they have, I think it was an assistant GM or someone like that's going to take over for the time being. Kevin O'Connell's going to run things through the NFL draft from what I read, and then they'll go through the hiring process of getting in another GM. That'll be interesting. We'll have to keep tabs on that. Well, speaking of Sam Darnold, he's going to be in the Super Bowl this Sunday. He's had that career renaissance that we've spoken about on past shows. The question, which I think is really difficult, who is the next Sam Darnold in the NFL? Do you have anyone off the top of your head, Coach?
I was thinking about this. This is a tough one. I think there are some candidates that, if given the opportunity to become starters again, might be able to do it. One guy that comes to mind is Mac Jones, who did some really good things in San Francisco when he filled in for Brock Purdy when Purdy was injured this past year. It's interesting. Darnold, when did Darnold's resurrection as a quarterback begin? That 1 year after he left Carolina and he went to San Francisco and he studied under Kyle Shanahan. And he says it got me to look at the quarterback position from a totally different perspective. And then he goes to Minnesota under Kevin O'Connell, and his career takes off. Well, Mac Jones now has spent some time with Shanahan in San Francisco. It'd be interesting to see how he would fare if given the opportunity to become a starter somewhere else.
There's a couple names that come to mind, and injury definitely clouds the picture. Daniel Jones is one, but he's coming off the ruptured Achilles. I think given an opportunity, and like you said, he spent time with Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota. He learned a lot there. He was playing some great high-level football before his injury. He's one I would go with, but I'm definitely going to question things moving forward because of that injury. The other one, which is kind of outside the box thinking, I'm going to go with Tua. I'm going to go with Tua down in Miami. To me, I always go back to Tua in Alabama, unseated Jalen Hurts as the starting quarterback, as a true freshman, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't just happen. Like that's not, he's a legitimate player. Now, unless the concussions have made his processing slow down. I mean, we watched him come to Pittsburgh with the Dolphins this past year. He looked like a shell of himself, and I don't know what it is. But I could see if he went into the right system, that guy's still talented. So unless he's not healthy, I could see him potentially having a little bit of a renaissance. What are your thoughts on those two guys?
That's what I wonder about with Tua is the processing there.
Right.
Have the hits both derailed his kind of willingness to hang in, and take more, and then B, has it slowed his ability to process in some fashion? So he's an interesting name. Jones, yeah, you're right. Mobility is such a big part of his game. He's still fairly young. He'll be able to bounce back from that injury, but will Indianapolis stay with him? Are they going to move on at the quarterback position? He's a free agent. Yep. So, he's now, where does he end up? There's a lot. Kyler Murray's an interesting one too. Because he's done okay. He's done okay. But as a guy who was a former number 1 overall pick, I think he's fallen short of expectation. He might need a change of venue. He might need to be in a different situation. So it'll be interesting to see what the Cardinals, and they got a new head coach in Mike LaFleur. What does he do with Tua? Do they move him? And if they do, how does his career fare?
Yeah. All right, let's finish this up with the profile. I wanted to talk about Mike Vrabel. So I looked this up. Mike Vrabel has the potential to be just the 5th coach to win a Super Bowl as a player and also as a head coach. So Tom Flores won a Super Bowl as a player with the Chiefs and also Super Bowls with Oakland/LA Raiders. Mike Ditka won a Super Bowl as a player with the Cowboys and then obviously with the Chicago Bears. Tony Dungy won a Super Bowl with the Steelers and then as the Colts. Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl with the Packers and then with the Eagles as a coach. Gary Kubiak, he's not a part of that list because he lost all 3 Super Bowls as a player, but won a Super Bowl as a head coach. So Vrabel obviously won Super Bowls with New England and has an opportunity to be a part of this elite crew. What are your thoughts on Mike Vrabel?
That's interesting. I knew about Ditka and Dungy. I did not know Peterson, and I never would have gotten to who was the first one you named?
Tom Flores.
Oh, Tom Flores, yeah. I never would have gotten to those two guys. Yeah, that's interesting, man. That's a fascinating list. Mike Vrabel, we were just talking about quarterbacks having their careers resurrected. You think about his career, he's drafted by the Steelers, and he's just kind of a role player. He had a big moment in a playoff game. I was actually at this game at Three River Stadium where he had a big sack to help the Steelers beat the Bills in a playoff game. but he didn't exactly excel as a Steeler. They let him walk, and he goes to New England, and Belichick finds a phenomenal role for him, and he becomes a core of those early Patriots Super Bowl teams, a core player. He's just got a winning mentality about him. He's a no nonsense dude. I saw a video of Mike Vrabel's first meeting as the head coach of the Patriots when he walked in there, and man, did he lay the law. It was like there's a new sheriff in town. Earbuds out, feet off the chairs, sit up straight. I mean, it was everything you would want from a guy coming in and saying, all right, man, we are changing the culture. So I can understand why he's been successful as both a player and a coach.
Yeah, I didn't realize, again, I thought about Ditka and Dungy. I didn't realize it was such an elite group, because I was thinking about it. Okay, players that won a Super Bowl, but then also went into coaching and got there. Very elite list. We'll see if Vrabel's at least he's already gotten there, but can he win one? We shall see. It's going to be exciting. Coach, what's your take on the call sheet this week? Anything special?
Yeah, we're doing all week long, really kind of doing a study on explosive plays until like Wednesday's episode is going to be on why Seattle's so good at creating these explosives and why New England is so good at taking them away. It's really interesting. Seattle and New England are number 1 and 2 in the NFL at explosive play differential, meaning the ones they create versus the ones they allow. They're the 2 best teams in the NFL at explosive margins. It really is becoming maybe the most important statistic in football. Everybody argues turnover ratio, and obviously that's important. But when you look at, the top 4 teams in explosive play margin in the NFL this year were the 4 teams in the championship games, including the Rams and the Broncos. So it's really, I'm taking a deep dive on that. And then Friday will be our big Super Bowl preview show with Pez. So that'll be a good one.
That'll be a good one. Make sure you check it out. The Call Sheet Daily, wherever you get your podcast. Check out his work with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that's what I do as well at the Steel Curtain Network and steelcurtainnetwork.com. Make sure you check us out. Coach, enjoy the Super Bowl. We'll talk about it next week. Take it easy.